You know what? I will never speak down the Cosmic Fury suits again if Elvis ends up being the surprise main villain.
We do our research on this podcast.
Good evening, Ranger Nation, and welcome to another exciting episode of Dragon Ball Z!
Already a mistake.
I'm just playing. You're listening to Ranger Nation podcast. This is a Ranger Nation conversation in every sense of a word, because this week we're going in depth on a topic that you, the listeners, we've got listeners, we can prove it for once, have decided. So assembled today are 5 grown-ups of attitude. Introducing first, he's got nothing covered but cold hard facts. It's John.
Howdy.
Next up, he's blue. He's a boy. He's a blue boy. It's Bryce.
I do love blue.
We know kids don't buy Power Rangers toys these days because this guy buys them all up first. Please welcome Jason.
What's up, guys?
And I mean, I'm just gonna let Seth's introduction speak for himself. So
I'm back this week and I have some polar bear facts. Would you like to hear one?
Sure.
Ice is the snack of the polar bear.
Oh my god.
I mean, this
my
podcast
God.
is both informative and educational. And finally, my name is Jay, and I make pretty pictures. And today's topic comes from rangerboard.com, and I'll let John give credit where credit is due there.
Shout out to AKA Green on Ranger Board for suggesting this topic and being a listener.
Anyway, the topic is a selection of what-if scenarios from the Power Rangers franchise. So we're going to be taking a look at various things over the years where things could have gone slightly differently, and what would we have ended up as a franchise, as a fandom? Where would we be? Where would the show be if these things had happened? So without further ado, let's get straight into the big one. I sound like I'm part of the cast of the last 15 years.
Oh.
And
Wow.
speaking of, Disney's first full production of Power Rangers was scheduled for 2003 when they moved production to New Zealand. What if they went all in on the franchise, put funding in, and said, "Sure thing, Mr. Baumick, let's go with this hexagon idea"?
There's a lot of
Trash.
variables that would have had to happen for that.
So, I'm just going to say it. I really like the hexagon idea. In fact,
I agree.
I think if they had scaled it down some, maybe cut back a little on the guest stars, because from the sound of it, there was going to be a lot of them. I think it could have been doable.
Okay, so for those listening that might not know, can someone give us a brief, or as brief as possible, because it does seem to be quite an in-depth scenario that was planned, of just what hexagon is, just in case people don't know what we're talking about?
I got it.
My-
So,
oh,
do
no, go
we
ahead.
do we rock, paper, scissors? Okay.
You know more than I do.
Hexagon was the idea conceived by we call him the a producer, a director. What was Amit to the franchise? Just a writer?
I think it was head writer, maybe? Head writer, something like that.
The guy who wrote Forever Red. We'll call him the ascended fanboy trope. He had this really cool idea for the Hurricaneger adaptation before we settled on Ninja Storm and all the Disney stuff happened. Where he basically had this idea for a Power Rangers Civil War. You had this organization called Hexagon that was ran by Tommy, and it was just like all these different Ranger teams together, and you had the 3 like Ninja Storm Rangers who were the new recruits, or I guess the B Squad Rangers, and then you had Jason's like little faction who were like opposing Hexagon. Oh god, my voice cracked. You had Jason's little faction who were like opposing Hexagon, and they were the Thunder Rangers, and it was just kind of a sort of one side versus the other in sort of like a loop hat kind of way. I'm really bad at like describing things, but it was just a super ambitious like crossover event. Think again, Marvel Civil War that would have like resulted in Tommy ending up as like the main big bad as well as the Green Samurai Ranger, and it was just it was a big thing.
It was also to tie up all the loose ends from everything from the very beginning till like then, just in case the show didn't go on anymore after that, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was intended to be like a finale, or at least a tying up of everything, like Countdown to Destruction.
Yeah, I don't think the intent was specifically to be like a series finale, but just more of like a way to wrap everything
Way to
up, and
end
then
these sections, yeah.
yeah, and then when we got to like the Alba Ranger adaptation, it would have just been like a whole clean slate.
Yep. So there you go. I personally love the idea. I think I mean a big fan of, like you said, comic book crossovers. I've kind of been on a spree of reading through all the DC ones lately, from like Crisis on Infinite Earth onwards. And there's just something so fun and so engaging about them. And obviously that's why the Avengers films are so successful. Like I think people just have an overall like love for this kind of thing. So I think anyone who doesn't like the idea, aside from the obvious, the whole, how can they afford this? We're gonna go with the idea that they decided that Disney did want to put, because Disney didn't own Marvel at this point. Like Disney really could have put all the funding they in to make Power Rangers like bigger than it had ever been if they decided to do this. So they theoretically could have. They obviously just decided not to. But yeah, I think anyone who says they don't like the idea, you're just lying to yourselves. Come at me,
Well, fine.
come at me, bro. So
Fine, you want to do this?
let's go.
The floor is yours, Seth.
Yeah, go on, Seth. You was
Go-
popping off
go
all
for
that
it.
good just a second ago. Let's hear you.
I like crossovers too. I just think this one sucked.
What about
I
it?
don't
sucked?
like it. The big thing for me is that the pitch that we heard was so focused on Jason and Tommy, Jason versus Tommy. There was almost no mention of what was supposed to be the current main team.
That is
It
understandable.
was so focused on the legacy that it wasn't a Hurricaneger adaptation. It was Jason Tommy's Civil War featuring the Hurricaneger suits occasionally.
I
That
love
is
it so
fair.
much.
Because
I love it so much.
because yeah, when like reading the call it a pitch, when reading the pitch for it, we barely get anything about the actual like current team of Rangers for that season. The most we get is like the Red Ranger is like the son of who would have been the main villain had it not been for Tommy kind of taking over as the main villain. And then you had the character who would go on to be Mara would have been like the Red Ranger's evil betrothed or whatever. But aside from that and the idea of maybe getting a third Thunder Ranger, we don't really know anything about this main team. The real focus is, like Seth said, on Jason and Tommy.
It it is so focused on legacy and nostalgia that it completely ignores the future, what should or what I guess the present.
It does very much come across as fan fiction, in that it's just not realistic in any way. And I think part of doing a what if episode is considering how it may have actually turned out. And with all of those grand ideas and guest stars and all of that, it never would have worked.
No.
Like even if Disney had been willing to try, realistically, it wouldn't have worked.
I disagree. I think the hardest part would have been getting all those actors back, which I would say we don't need to get all of them back. I think
Does Joel really need to pilot the helicopter, kind of thing?
I was gonna say he could have been one of the ones that we probably could have kept, but I think another hard part would have probably been getting Austin St. John and Jason David Frank to work together again for an entire season.
Yeah.
I think at that point they weren't really cool anymore.
It was only a year after. In fact, it wasn't even only a year, because I guess this would have been in planning at the time of Wild Force, right? So they worked together in Forever Red. They even shook hands. So
Yeah, but a whole special is kind of different from like we're basically co-stars for a whole season.
it is,
Yeah.
but I don't know. I think what was this, 2003? So obviously would have been filming in like 2002. I don't think from what I know about the feud and stuff, I think it wasn't as serious as it became in later years.
Okay.
I don't
Well
know,
then,
and
yeah, and if that is the case, then yeah, the only real like issue keeping this from being doable, in my opinion, was the number of Rangers they were planning to get back. If they could cut down on that, or maybe do a lot of like, I guess, cameos of the Rangers just in suit, so they don't actually have to get the actors, I think it could have been feasible.
But that's what I mean about being realistic about all these situations is that it would have ended up getting whittled down somehow and watered down and not being what the grand vision was. And that's just the reality of Power Rangers. It happens every season.
Yeah, it would have been, but I don't think it's to the point where it gets so watered down that there's no point in even attempting it anymore. I still, I can't even really complain because again, I love Ninja Storm, but hearing this idea, it was just something I really wish that they had at least attempted. Because like, even if it ended up being a bad attempt, it's just one of those things where it's like my own personal curiosity just has me going. I really want to see how this would have turned out.
oh
I
yeah,
do.
yeah. Oh, sorry, not going,
um,
John.
I do agree that it being at that time with Disney taking over was the best chance for it to ever work, because it
Yes.
definitely would never work now.
Absolutely not. I wouldn't actually. Let me strike that because if it had been done by Disney or Saban back then, absolutely I would have wanted to see it. It's not something I would want to see now.
No, not now.
Yeah,
No, and
Well, no,
I
no,
think
no.
old Saban would have would have had a far better shot of doing it than the newer Saban stuff, because at that point they had
yeah.
pretty much given up on continuity and all that other kinds of stuff. But
We've seen how the current regime treats past Rangers. I don't even want that to
yeah,
be an attempt now.
Oh yeah,
well,
that's like a completely different conversation, isn't it? That's like a whole other thing.
Hmm.
my whole thing is that I've said it before. I'm not the hugest Tommy fan out there, so to have upped him to the status of a Zordon type mentor doesn't really sit real well with me. That's probably my biggest gripe about the entire thing, and I think that would put a little bit of a beef towards Austin St. John, because now you've got somebody that's like put up higher on a pedestal than the original Red Ranger, and I really like saying how they would have acted with each other. I think that there would have been an even larger divide there between both of them. So
I think it kind of balances itself out there because in the end, yes, Tommy is propped up as like the big like new Zordon, but in the end, the way that story was described, he ends up being like ultimately the bad guy. Everything he did ends up being wrong, and Jason is right. Jason's the badass rebel guy who's like leading a team of Rangers against the guy who would ultimately be the main villain.
yeah,
So
but I don't think,
yeah,
in my personal mind, knowing how Power Rangers goes, I don't think Disney nor Saban would have let that part happen. I don't think they would have let Tommy be evil on his own accord. Under the influence of Rita, that's one thing. Tommy just being the bad guy towards the end, I don't know if they would have really have gone for that. So I think that's one of the parts that would have gotten watered down quite a bit, and just made kind of a
it
mediocre
helps
movie.
that it was less him going evil and just more him
Having too much
kind of
power.
getting blind.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
and I get
he
that.
does come to his senses at the end in sort of like a "what have I done" kind of way. So it's not like they're committing to like evil Tommy. It's more like he's letting his own vision get in the way of like what's actually right.
Yeah. Plus, I think they would have had like joint billing as like top stars, surely, because if like Tommy's like the leader of one team, Jason's the leader of the other team, then surely obviously they're gonna have, equal pay, equal this. I think that probably would have eased. And again, it's acting, it's people performing roles in a TV series that they're paid to do. I think that's different than two people that used to be on a kid show in the 90s that didn't like the other one because they thought they weren't as good at karate as the other one, kind of thing, Like it's a different scenario, so I don't think that would have been as big of a deal as otherwise it could have been. You're gonna get that in every scenario and every not even acting in every work. You're always gonna get people that don't like each other but have to work together. I think it probably would have been like that. The sad reality is it probably could and should have been like that in the upcoming Once a Ranger special, but again, that's a different topic for a different time. So
I just think at the end of the day, it was far more ambitious than Power Rangers has ever been capable of pulling off.
Oh, it absolutely would have been, but I don't think that should have stopped them from attempting it.
No. The curbing of ambition is kind of what's I feel like has killed a lot of interest in the franchise in recent years. Anyway, so
Yeah.
Well, that kind of brings us into some of our other what if scenarios.
Yeah.
What was the next? What was the next one we were doing?
I've got another one listed here. So let's see. Okay, so in Power Rangers Dino Thunder, rumors ran wild when the source footage of that season, Abba Ranger, featured a seemingly entirely new Ranger. What if Devon, or maybe someone else, had become the Triassic Ranger?
Really happy they didn't do that.
Yeah, no kidding.
I think it could have been fun. I'm ultimately glad they didn't, but
I'm all for them doing original things, and I think if they had made that choice before they knew what the footage gave them, it would have forced them to make new footage and do new things, and I'm always for that.
Part of me kind of wonders though, because Evan was always such like a package deal with Cassidy. What would her role in the story turn into if he ended up becoming a ranger?
That's a good question.
I don't know.
It's not something that ever really occurred. Like when I was watching it, like I remember because it was around the time that I'd really just rediscovered the franchise and discovered Sentai.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I remember seeing rumors about it online, but I never really kind of when I was watching the show thought, "Ooh, this comic relief character as part of the comic relief duo is going to become a." You know, it would have been like if Skull had become the White Ranger in MMPR.
Yeah, and it's like what happens with Bulk, because now
Exactly.
Skull's just
Yeah.
gonna be hanging out with the Rangers now, and can't tell him. So
Well, yeah, it makes you wonder how true the rumor actually is, because even early on, we saw no reason to believe he would ever become more than just comic relief.
not even comic relief, the sidekick to the comic relief.
Right.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, yeah. It is an interesting one. I think it's interesting because I think that obviously Triassic Ranger ended up functioning basically the exact same as it did in Abba Ranger. It was just a power up, but in a lot of ways because it had its own unique name, it had all. It really could have been. It really could have been its own unique character. I mean, is
Had
that
its
something
own
that you
Zord.
guys? Yeah. Is that something that you guys would have liked? Is that something that you think is a more interesting concept than what they went with?
Well, like I said, I'm always for them being creative and making their own footage and telling their own story. So yeah, please do
I
that.
think I prefer what they ended up going with, but I can't say I would automatically hate the idea of them turning that into a completely new Ranger. So I
Same.
guess my only concern would be they already weren't the best at balancing the 5 Rangers they already had. How well would a 6th member of the cast have like functioned?
I agree with
Well,
that. Yeah.
that's I don't know. It's interesting because would Dino Thunder have been the first season that only had 5 Rangers by the end?
I think it was. Yeah.
It was the first one too, but then we also had Jungle Fury.
Oh
does
no, so
Alien Rangers count?
Oh,
Alien, I real Alien and Turbo, I guess as well.
Turbo's
Turbo has a 6.
yeah. Turbo depends on what you consider the Phantom Ranger and Blue Centurion.
There are extra
Find out
Rangers.
more if you listen to last week's episode of Ranger Nation
There are
Conversation.
extra Rangers.
Lightspeed could have been that if it weren't for Ryan.
Yes, if it weren't for the 6th member, they would have been.
You know what I mean. If they hadn't if they hadn't decided to add their own like original 6th Ranger, then Lightspeed would have probably not even probably it would have been first one to just have the 4 or 5.
I think the reason why we did that was because they probably thought we're so used to having like 6 Rangers and like an extra one. We need to do this ourselves, and
I'm glad they did it.
yeah, 100% to Lightspeed's credit, yeah.
Yep, back when original Ranger costumes looked good.
For all 5 minutes that Ryan was on screen.
I'm not going to even talk about Ryan again. Not after the last time. Screw that.
I want to know the context for that. I'm excited.
I make one mention of something and it goes completely off the rails. It's like, I'm done.
Oh, you mean like Bryce and Elgar?
What is with y'all and like me and Elgar? What is going on here?
Like Ryan and his adopted father, me, Diabolico.
Just hanging off the side of a cliff.
Guys, don't deny your love for him.
I mean, Elgar is awesome, yes, but
Yeah, he said it.
he
He admitted it.
It's recorded for the world to see, Bryce.
Evatox is better, but Elgar is awesome.
Yeah, but Elvis, though.
The Power Rangers ultimate villain.
You know what? I will never speak down the Cosmic Fury suits again if Elvis ends up being the surprise main villain.
You thought I was dead, baby.
Oh god, this time you can't blame me for us getting off topic.
Okay, well, speaking of you, Bryce, I believe you had a suggestion for a what-if scenario earlier on.
Technically two, they just have to do it the same thing, and they're both in regards to Lost Galaxy. So, as everybody knows, in the middle of Lost Galaxy, Valerie Vernon had to leave
Valerie
because she
Bertinelli.
had... Hendrix unfortunately had to leave because actress had leukemia and she had to go for treatment. So Corone, who had played Melody Perkins, who had played Corone, who was Astronema in in Power Rangers in Space, came in to sort of fill in as the Pink Ranger until like the last episode where Valerie came back and got her powers back. We already know that story. So wonder how many people know that originally the person that was going to be taking Kendrick's place was Cassie, the Pink Space Ranger, Pink Turbo Ranger, replacement cat. And she had actually made it pretty far in. They had at least 2 episodes recorded of her as the Pink Ranger before she left for, as far as I know, unconfirmed reasons, but I guess we're going to call it a rumor, is that it was because she wasn't satisfied with being credited as a guest star. So, what are everybody's thoughts on that? Do we think that Cassie would have been a better pick than Corone, especially given how little they really did with Corone?
I wouldn't say better, but I mean, Cassie's a top tier Pink Ranger, so any more we get of her is fantastic. I do think bringing in Corone was an interesting story choice. I mean, they ultimately didn't do much with it, but it was interesting story choice.
Yeah, I think Corona is the far more interesting choice.
Yeah,
And also, they would have probably done the same amount of nothing with Cassie.
Probably,
so.
yeah.
Probably. In fact, one of the episodes, the Corone and Damon focus episode, that pretty much was
It's
originally
clearly written for Cassie.
Yeah, written for Cassie to the point where I think it was Jason, he was the one who posted the frame from that episode where they actually forgot to edit Cassie out.
Oh, interesting.
yeah,
What episode is
that
that?
again.
Just so people to...
Dang, I should have gotten the name of it. It was the one where Damon was like trying to get this promotion and Corone like just spent the entire episode as his hype man.
Oh, okay.
Well, I'll find
One
the name real quick. You guys just keep talking.
The enemy of that was a bat that had sonic powers or something. I can't remember. Maybe
What, he was really fast and blue? Is that the wrong Sonic?
I don't know. But anyway,
I completely missed what he just said. What?
I got
How-
your
how we
joke,
get
Jay.
to
It was
Sonic?
funny.
Thanks, John. Thanks, John.
Episode 34. Turn up the volume.
Yep. That was it. That was where Corone was written like Cassie.
We do our research on this podcast.
All in real time. I fully agree that Corone is by far the more interesting choice. Like, it's the whole, big bad of a one season coming back and being a hero and getting redemption. Like, that's a really, really... It's almost surprising they didn't do it more often, or they haven't done it like as often since. We might be getting that at some point in an upcoming season, maybe, based on rumors that I believe we've heard. But the fact that it's not happened much is kind of really quite surprising, really, when you consider how long the franchise has been going on. The fact that she didn't do much and they didn't take advantage of that kind of confirms the idea that the character was basically written as Cassie, because otherwise they would have had they planned it in advance as Corone, surely they'd have done a lot more like interesting things and explored the whole, guilt and ramifications of being an astronomer a lot more than they did.
It's such an interesting idea that I go as far as to say, and no offense to Valerie at all when I say this, Perone should have been the Pink Ranger from the very start.
Ooh.
They would have had way more to do with her in that regard if she had just kind of been there from the beginning. As to say I don't like Kendricks or anything. She's actually like one of my favorite Pink Rangers, especially because of that episode with whole Psycho Ranger fighting. I know it's not a it's not a good look me saying that my favorite episode is the one where she died, but no, I think she was an amazing character. I just think we would have gotten a lot more out of Corone being the Pink Ranger that we had in that season from the very beginning.
I think Corone coming in instead of Cassie made Lost Galaxy maybe a little bit stronger in that regard, because you had Hendrix die, and then you think, oh, Cassie's going to take her place. Then something gets a little weird when all the Rangers are standing there in their suits, the Space Rangers at least, and you're like, I wonder why they're not demorphed. Well, of course, all this other stuff was going down behind the scenes, but it's. I think Corone coming in and the chasing down of the Quasar Saber, and she's the one that gets it in her astronomer persona, and so I just think it made a few better episodes than I think maybe what the series might have continued on as.
Again, being kind of the Debbie Downer realist about these what if scenarios, in reality, chances are the season was already written before Valerie Vernon got sick. So it wouldn't have mattered who replaced her. They were really just copy and pasting things onto whoever was there. So
yeah, that's a good point.
So other than the key episodes that needed to happen to explain why she's there, it would have been the same if Kendricks was still there.
Yeah, but then it kind of makes me wonder too, like how would the Battleizer have come into play then at that point, and things like that, because there was a lot of stuff that had to be rewritten, and there were a couple times where you could tell that maybe they had kind of written it for Corone a little bit, because I remember one point in particular where she got kind of excited to morph, and to me that kind of seemed more like a far more Corone type of thing than it would have been for Cassie. So there's little things here and there, but
there would have had to be little changes like that just to make sense. Yeah. But I think largely all the episodes that came after that would have been more or less the same, regardless of who was playing Pink.
Oh, sure, I agree.
I do think it's interesting that had Cassie stayed instead of Corone, we wouldn't have gotten like an episode of her, kind of fighting the Quasar Saber, fighting Trakina, having the powers, having Kendrick actually pass down the powers to her and stuff like we had with Corone. Because when I read the script for like her debut episode as the Pink Ranger, it was just a regular episode. She was just already integrated as part of the team.
Yeah, I think it would have been to the detriment of the series as a whole, which is that's not a knock at Cassie's character, obviously. I think it's just a more interesting, and I think Bryce, you just presented probably a more interesting what if scenario, is in what if Corone was Lost Galaxy Pink from the start. I think that's a really interesting idea, because that's, in a lot of ways, that's taken just as much advantage of the whole Power Rangers formula over the Sentai one than anything else. Obviously, Sentai doesn't almost ever have like recurring characters, whereas this, having the ability to cherry pick from a past season and reintroduce that character as someone else or in a different role, that's like a really good, really interesting, especially with someone like Corone, someone as strong as that. Yeah, I think that would have been, and again, I enjoyed Kendricks as a character when I rewatched the show. She was probably one of the stronger personalities in the team as well.
Absolutely.
But I think the idea of Corone from the start, almost having you could have extended the opening for maybe a couple more episodes to really introduce Corone again, and basically have the exact same scenario as her coming in and disguising herself as astronomer and all that stuff from the beginning of the show, and playing it up more over the course of the entire season is just a really fascinating idea that we could have done.
It really would have been. And it would have given us more time to actually develop her like post Astronema, the time that she didn't get in the actual season because of the unfortunate unfortunateness, is that a word? It's because of how the circumstances surrounding her joining the show. She was just kind of a fill-in, whereas if she had just been there from the start, she would have been there from the start. She would have actually been a planned out, fully fleshed character.
Right. And actually, you could have probably fit her in pretty easily with even the way the episodes were. She could have just been part of being on the Astro Mega ship, before they took off, too. Alpha was already on there. Damon's the mechanic. Corone could have been put there as something, a guide, a story, taking people through, and then she ends up staying on the ship to leave with them.
Like all that space lore that they got from Kendricks and like the Lost Galaxy book and all that, it could have easily just been stuff that Corone knew just from her years traversing through space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, now you're kind of making me want that. Seriously, the possibilities of that really would have made a really good show, a good character arc for her.
Honestly, could have made Corone like one of the better Pink Rangers we've had.
Yeah, no, agreed. So I think we've kind of reached a natural conclusion of that particular what if.
Yep.
Has anyone else got any others to suggest? I have a selection of others that are all tied to Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, which is in keeping with what's coming up next month. But if anyone's got anything else to go through first, let's go for it.
Well, I assume one of yours is the one I would say, so let's go ahead.
Okay, so first of all, I'm going to go with a slight ease into that one. So, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers was obviously the most popular thing. It was the new hotness across the world in 1993 and 1994. And it was based on a Japanese show which only had one season. It was initially supposed to end at Doomsday. What if, when it ended at Doomsday, they didn't continue on, they didn't get new G2 footage, they, in 1994, introduced a new season, Power Rangers Kung Fury. What would it have done? Would it have killed the franchise dead in the water there and then? Would it have changed how we view Mighty Morphin and other seasons in terms of how they could be popular? Would it mean that JDF carried on as Cybertron and not in coming back as the White Ranger? Like what could we be looking at as a franchise? Would this podcast even exist?
I think it would have killed it.
I think
part of me, just because I would have preferred that, even as a kid, I would have preferred that. I want to have hope and say that maybe franchise would have continued. Just nostalgia for Mighty Morphin itself might not have been as powerful. Which,
I grew up with. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, which honestly might have been for the best, given how a lot of people treat Mighty Morphin as the only thing that Power Rangers has to offer. But I think if they weren't going to do that, I still think they should have at least used the Time Ranger suits for season 2.
And just had the original Mighty Morphin cast use the suits as well as the Zords and stuff. That's interesting. I couldn't see that working personally. I think at that point in time, if they switch suits, they'd probably have to switch characters too.
I think since we already had Tommy switching suits and that didn't do anything except make people think Tommy was more awesome. I don't think that
That's true, yeah.
I don't think the whole cast switching to, let's be real, better looking suits would have done anything, because the characters themselves still would have been there. They just would have been wearing different clothes. You might as well have done it. Everything else was already different. The main villain was different. The Zords were different. Tommy was different. There was no point in keeping them in the dinosaur suits.
This may be controversial, but I think the way they did do things was the worst possible way to ensure the longevity of the brand. I think sticking with the Jew Ranger suits for as long as they did, sticking with the cast for as long as they did, it cemented that as Power Rangers in the zeitgeist. Nothing else will ever be Power Rangers to the wider audience. And
100% agreed.
And that works somewhat, but the way the brand just kept trudging along for 25 years after that has really driven it into the ground. in terms of cultural relevance, where most people don't even know it's still on. And that's really hurting it now when there are attempts to reboot it, to bring it back for a larger audience. It's such a specific thing in everyone's head. And I think specifically for this what if they had adapted the Sentai model immediately, like they did post Lost Galaxy, of just a reboot each season, the show may not have lasted as long as it has, but maybe it would have developed into something else. Because then that would have been Power Rangers.
I agree. I think it would have stopped maybe that it's like 30-year long continuity we've gotten going on. It might have gotten cut short a little earlier than we have now, but I think the series itself would have resurfaced in some way, same way that like Transformers does.
I agree it would have been cut short. I just think it would have been cut short at around year 3. I think just completely switching everything out in year 2 would have killed the series.
See, I agree with that. I think, and it's tricky though because it's. I think the way the West views superhero franchises, it is like always like it's a continuing thing. It's always like a continuing continuity. What is continuity if not continuing? It's one of those things where it's people are so used to, with Spider-Man, it's Spider-Man 1, then Spider-Man 2, then Spider-Man 3. It's not Spider-Man, and then in the next film it's suddenly Miles Morales, and there's no mention of all the other characters and all the things like that. It's always, look at the MCU. It's successful because it's a tied together, intrinsic world. It's I think the Sentai format works in Japan and works as Sentai because number one, it was established from the very beginning, and number two, I think Japanese media in general does that an awful lot. Like, you look at the Final Fantasy game series or you look at Sentai and Kamen Rider, it's always its own unique universe or story or like pantheon of characters with, the occasional crossover here and there and stuff like that when it necessitates it. But I don't know, it's tricky. But then at the same time, I think obviously the reason why Mighty Morphin is the be all end all of Power Rangers is because, like John said, and he's right, it was 3 years of the same essential characters, like look, setting, with only the mech really being the thing that changed. And obviously the introduced villains here and there too, but it was very much a continuing. This is season 1, 2, 3, as opposed to a complete blank slate every single time. Obviously, that goes much more with the whole Western view of how these things are supposed to be. I don't know. Power Rangers was so popular, it really would have been a risk, but the risk may have paid off. That is the big interesting what if here, because we'll never know if it would have paid off or not.
So I'll raise you this. What if we had some sort of compromise where we were still getting a new cast of Rangers, but it was still like the story was still clearly continuing off of what came before it. Like maybe we had a couple of mainstays like on the team, like maybe somebody like Jason or Kimberly stayed on to just bringing the entire team back, or what if one of them were like mentor figures now, and next season like took place like a little further in the future? Like instead of going completely a clean slate, we're still kind of getting this new feeling, but it's still built off of what we had before.
Yeah, I think ideally that probably would have been the best solution. Maybe not keeping, like, say, Jason and Kimberly, who were arguably, I'd say, 2 of the 3 most popular characters in the show. I think if you keep them on, then you'd always have that kind of audience reaction of, oh, well, they're the real ones. These new ones aren't as good. It's like Saved by the Bell of a new class, no one cared about the new class. That's a dated reference right there. I apologize.
Nobody under 40 understands that reference.
It would kind of be like how Transformers they kind of always have this like different sort of rotation of different Autobots, but Optimus is still like usually always there.
Well, and you could have had Billy, play more of like his Zeo role, possibly, where he's more of just the tech guy of the group, building the things or doing stuff or whatever. I think that probably would have worked out a lot better.
I think as long as they kept some sense of familiarity, it wouldn't be like as big a resistance to like a complete changing of the costumes or the cast of characters who are the Rangers. And who knows, maybe Rocky would have actually gotten the chance to be a character.
Don't talk crazy talk. He's a fireman now, Bryce.
Yeah, I guess he is.
That clearly wasn't intended to be Jason. I think. Oh, sorry, no, go on, Jason.
No, we're good. We're good. I was just saying that he had a carton of Chinese food in his hand too. It just
So he could have been Dire
the way
Ranger.
he just teleports in. He's facing away from everybody. He's got his hat in one hand. He's got a box of Chinese food in the other. I don't know. And he's kind of standing there staring like, what the hell just happened? You know, it's just, yeah, I don't know. There's just something funny about that entire part.
I like Bryce's idea of continuing the world in season 2 and having it be like a whole of a team. You could have had it, obviously, we know with Dire Ranger, it's a very, and again, they probably wouldn't have acknowledged the fact that it's a very Chinese-based aesthetic and stuff like that.
They wouldn't have.
Certainly didn't with the Zords. But
Look at how they treated the ninja aspects in Kaku Ranger. The ninja team were alien fish.
It's morphin time! I think it would have been very cool, for me at least, if you could have even had it whereas it's a team from China. We could have had different countries of Ranger teams, different, obviously different cities. We're used to that. And they could have really done that, and it could have been like a Chinatown cast of characters, and hence that's why, it's Chinese themed, martial arts based, all that kind of stuff.
Back then, do you really trust them to do a completely like Chinese cast for this?
Oh God, no, of course not. Like it's one of those things where it's the one thing I will give credit to Power Rangers for is obviously diversity. I think that's been one of the few shows which has kind of always placed an emphasis on it, like from its inception. But yeah, you're right. If it was just a team of, say, purely Asian American or the Chinese characters itself, yeah, they probably wouldn't have done that all that well.
But they could have been from Stone Canyon then at that point too, since we had the
Chinatown Stone Canyon.
Yeah.
Got choked on my own words. But anyway, they could have had, if they wanted to tie it, have that part too, picking, because who knows what it would have been now with, not bringing in the 3 from Stone Canyon. Now you could throw that in, that maybe they've moved to a different city, but that city's still kind of close to them, kind of thing. So you could still have that nice little tie-in. The power chamber could still be where it is, and all that kind of stuff. So
they teleport, so it's not like you need to move the command center, because again, teleportation.
Although they did in a certain trailer, it's now by the sea.
You know whose command center was also by the sea? Zordon's student Ghost Center.
That's probably where we've got it from. They've watched Megaforce. We've not watched Mighty Morphin Power Rangers.
Probably so.
Can we not talk about the unclean?
No. Okay. So I was gonna say before, in retrospect, it's one of those things where I'm sure like Haim Saban was probably kicking himself for not doing a full Dire Ranger adaptation when literally half the cast decided to just up sticks and leave.
Yep.
Like, had they just gone for like an entirely new cast straight away, then they could have, we could have completely averted that problem, and even still brought back Tommy as White Ranger.
Yeah.
I think that kind of leads us into another what if, a more severe one maybe, is that what if the show ended at Doomsday? There was no season 2, and maybe controversial again, but I do think the brand would be stronger today if they had done that.
I don't know about that. I think, like everything else in the 90s, it would have ended up popping back up in some way, shape, or form today. I don't think the franchise itself would have benefited in any way from stopping at season 1.
I just think, like we said, in the zeitgeist, Power Rangers is a very specific thing. And even within that, it's even more specific. It's season 1. Red, green, yellow, blue, pink, black, green. Dino Megazord.
By extension, also, I'd say early season 2. I think Lord Zed's just as iconic as Rita in terms of villains.
I'll give you that.
More.
But if you ask a normal person about Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, they don't know Rocky or Aisha.
A normal person?
They don't know Adam. They don't know the Thunder Megazord.
Where do I find one of these?
Stone Canyon Trio, they have their fans.
But is that as strong as season 1?
As strong as season 1? I'm going to say no, but I think because they were the team alongside Tommy when he was the White Ranger, and they were the team that got to be in the movie, Not
in the movie.
yeah, I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah,
going to completely
definitely.
sleep on them.
I think the movie does a lot of heavy lifting
Yep.
there.
But for those characters, yes, definitely.
I just think if Power Rangers had stayed a very specific thing, kind of like Ninja Turtles is.
Yeah.
That's kind of one story everybody knows that keeps getting rebooted generationally. And I'm sorry, but I do think Ninja Turtles is a stronger brand than Power Ranger.
Oh, by far.
Oh, it is.
By
It's
far.
100% is. Yeah, yeah.
But the only Ninja Turtles thing that only lasted one season was the one nobody likes to talk about.
That's what I was gonna say. I think the difference there is Ninja Turtles became popular because the original cartoon went on for 10 seasons. Like, granted, it was in terms of like popularity and like the zeitgeist, like you said, it was replaced by Power Rangers itself. I always kind of view them as very similar, almost like brother and sister series, where it's even though they're not related, apart from that one time that they were related. Thanks, Saban. Thanks for that monstrosity. Jesus fucking Christ.
Wait, no,
Um,
because I gotta give that episode its props. It had like one of my favorite lines where Astronomer was like asking Michelangelo something, and he just looks at her dead serious and was like, "You're asking me, a turtle who lives in the sewers, to explain a cosmic event to you?"
I wasn't even just meaning that one episode. I just kind of meant Next Mutation in general. It's an abomination.
Were you about
Well,
to say, Seth?
That episode's good. It's just the next mutation isn't.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's the point I was trying to
Okay.
make.
But at the end of the day, what did Ninja Turtles get that Power Rangers has never gotten? Sequels.
Yeah, I'll agree with John on this one because, you know, everything that would have been rebooted or redone or everything for generational would have been Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. It would not have been
Yes.
anything else, and there was nothing else to go off of. So, you know, you'd kind of see throughout the changing times new people coming in with new stories of Jason and Trini and Zach, and you wouldn't have all this other stuff going along with it. I can see where that actually would have been a really interesting take on it. And considering everybody thinks of Mighty Morphin as Power Rangers, I don't really think anything would have changed that much as far as the general aspect of it.
I was about to say that's kind of where we're at anyway, so that doesn't really make too much of a difference
Yeah.
because obviously when we get a new movie, it's Mighty Morphin. When we get a new comic book, it's Mighty Morphin. When we get a new toy line that's kind of like licensed out from Hasbro, it's Mighty Morphin. But when we get a 30th anniversary special, it's Mighty Morphin. It's kind of like they know,
Yeah,
or at least it feels like they're starting to learn that Mighty Morphin really is like the only like profitable like cash cow that they've got as a franchise. Like, I mean, and like we've seen numbers. Like from like my audience on social media, I can kind of see the age range of the fandom and kind of where tastes lie. And it's you know, I hate to break it to anybody, but it's not with Dino Fury, and I don't think it's gonna be with Cosmic Fury. It's Mighty Morphin. I think, you know, talking about like what ifs and mistakes, I think it's a mistake. I think it's a big mistake to have once a Ranger, once and always first, and then closer to the actual anniversary itself, having Cosmic Fury second. Like,
yeah.
it's, you know what I mean? It's kind of like you're having like the opening match as the main event, and then the main event just comes first. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, like business wise, but that's neither here nor there. That's just an aside.
I can see that.
I think canceling it at season 1 would have been a mistake. I think
Yeah, I'm not seeing how it would positively benefit it in any way that it's not already benefiting from now.
I don't think anything that was as big popular both, and again, it's one of those things where you say kids franchise. In a lot of ways, Mighty Morphin almost transcended kids franchises. Even at the time, it was like the number one like franchise in terms of like just global reach and toy sales and overall like notoriety. Like, think of the amount of like other TV shows that referenced Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Like, I've been rewatching season 1 of Friends lately, and like they full on like reference Mighty Morphin.
Yeah.
Like it's a show aimed at adults. You know what I mean? It was so ubiquitous in pop culture that everybody knew what it was. Like, you know, Marvel was bankrupt at the time. Star Wars was on hiatus. Like, there was no Ninja Turtles was kind of like fading in popularity. It was the biggest thing, and I think canceling it at season 1 would have killed that dead in the water. I think that's why I think the idea of, did season 2 become a Dire Ranger adaptation or a continuation, and like that's like a bigger what if than that. But it is an
But
interesting one, and again, it kind of leads into another what if, which we'll get to in a second. But go on, John, you have
I
something else
think
to
it
say.
begs the question: if it was so big, if it was this unavoidable entity in the zeitgeist in 1993, 1994, why did the movie coming out at the absolute peak only do okay?
I don't think the movie did come out at the peak. It's odd because I think the shelf life of like super popularity times of things can be quite short. I think did it hit the movie, but it didn't have the original cast 100%. I think if the movie had had Jason and Kimberly and Tommy and Zach and Trini and Billy rather than the Stone Canyon trio, because I think when the movie came out, I don't even know if we'd had season 2 over here yet.
They were so Jason, Zach, and Trainee were actually still in the cast when they were even advertising the movie. So yeah, I think their movie had been planned for a while. It's just they did it a little late.
I mean, Jason and I
I
are the
yeah,
only ones old enough to remember that, but I remember very much in 1994 knowing that it was coming. It was a big deal.
the
Yeah,
movie.
the movie.
Oh, see, that's I remember because I'm still quite old. I was about, I think, was I 4 or 5 when the movie came out over here? I can't remember what it was, and I vaguely remember. But I don't know. I feel like it was a lot of people would have been like, "Oh, it's not really the Power Rangers because it wasn't the original cast and it kind of looked different." And apparently my room just fell over. I apologize. Um, I don't know. I think the overall sheen of the show had started to fade slightly by the time the movie came out.
That said, do TV show tie-in movies ever do spectacularly?
Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, Turtles did exceptionally well.
Because
W-
what came
I
first for
don't. I
Ninja
wouldn't.
Turtles, the movies or the show?
The
Okay.
cartoon. The cartoon came in the 80s. I think the movie was 90 or 91.
Okay.
86
I'm
was,
sure Jason will be able to
86
tell me.
was the cartoon series, I do believe, and of course 90 was the first movie. But the thing was, just sidetracking on that, the movie didn't take the Fred Wolf series into consideration. They took the original comic book inspiration.
Yes,
So I think
Yeah.
that's what I was going to say. Yeah.
that in and of itself is what gave it a stronger push. Was it? No, I went to go see it. At that time, I didn't even. I had no clue what Rangers were. Whenever Rangers took off and everything, even about the movie, I didn't give any crap about that because I was still a huge Turtles fan. But I remember in 1990 going and seeing the movie and being kind of taken aback a little bit because it's like this is a little darker and not as lively and comical as the cartoon. So I think that's what it had going for it and why it did so well.
Yeah, and elements were different. Like I remember when, again, because I watched all of these things after the fact, but I remember like growing up because we had like a VHS tape. Oh, nothing more 90s than the VHS tape of,
Run a
I think,
Turtles
the
VHS.
first 5 episodes. I think season 1 of Turtles was just like 5 episodes, and we had that on VHS, and then we also had the movie on VHS. And like it's different. Like the background of Splinter's a completely different backstory, and there's so many things there that are different. Whereas in some ways the Power Rangers movie was too. Like there was, the command center was different and how certain things were, and like the fact that Babu and Squat were replaced by Mordant. Who the is Mordant? Like it was like this weird disconnect, but it was still very much like you kind of needed to have known the show to know who these characters were, because unlike the Turtles movie, which I felt like did a good job of characterizing the 4 different turtles, the movie did nothing to characterize like the 6 Ranger characters. They were literally just, these are a bunch of people that you should know from the TV show. If you don't, then you're not going to like it. And so the movie, in a lot of ways, really didn't cater itself to a larger audience than the kids who watched the
Movie
show.
was also the first time I saw like Zed and Rita together, because by the time I was like old enough to actually remember like watching Power Rangers, we had already gotten way past that point. So the only way I could see Mighty Morphin was through my old VHS tapes, and I had like none of season 3 or the end of season 2. So I just remember watching the movie and just thinking, why are Zed and Rita there at the same time? Who is the pig guy? What
Yeah,
what
yeah.
what is what is a pterodactyl thunder whip? Did I miss something?
You know, the weird thing is, and it's another what if for maybe another time, but what if the Ranger movie had actually cast, like not have taken from the show, but actually cast real actors, had a stronger script and stuff like that, what would we have seen? That's what Turtles did. Turtles didn't hire any of the people that were from the cartoon to voice them or anything like that. It's
So basically, what if we got the 2017 movie earlier?
Ooh, yeah, that's a really good what if, actually, Jason.
That is-
That's interesting.
His name is Bryce.
No, I thought Jason suggested it, didn't he?
Nah, Jason, that was pretty much what he was going for. I was just basically
no,
just
Yeah,
clarifying.
you're you're
That's what he meant.
guilty thief.
but the thing is, it still would have been that '90s charm of sorts. What Turtles had, just kind of maybe using that as a template and
With
move
a
and
bigger
just
cast.
making it a little bit stronger, because you wouldn't have had all the glorious CGI and stuff, back then. So it would have been interesting to see what they would have come up with maybe just a little bit more budget, higher paid actors, a stronger script. What would that have been like? And to me, that interested me a little bit.
No, that actually is a really good what if. 'Cause,
Well, going back to the show maybe ending earlier than it did, I think the way it ended up existing, kind of trudging along, churning out adaptations, it kind of lulled the various owners into a sense of, I don't know, complacency. And I think they really missed an opportunity in the early to mid, even late 2000s of rebooting with a big budget movie based on Mighty Morphin right at the time when that specific type of movie was all the rage.
my only concern with Power Rangers basically doing the same thing that Ninja Turtles did, where it would just keep on rebooting itself with just different actors, different continuities, and all that. They wouldn't take advantage of the different Sentai aesthetics we had. You would just be stuck with Mighty Morphin and the dinosaurs and all that for all time. So for that,
We're gonna be
Yeah,
gonna
we
be
already
anyway.
are.
Prepare yourself.
we're
Bryce.
stuck with that, but then we also still have all these other past seasons stuff to go back to. We still have the adaptations that do new things depending on what happens after Cosmic Fury. Um, so with that in mind, I am happy we have that. I don't obviously I probably wouldn't care because I wouldn't know about the other stuff, but I knowing about it now, I wouldn't want to sacrifice all the other adaptations we did have just to have this nothing but Mighty Morphin for 30 years straight in different
That's
intervals.
fair. So that brings us quite neatly to the next what if scenario. So I think it's something that John's foreshadowed a little bit there, but throughout the 30 years of the franchise's history, there's been a few very distinct endpoints that really could have been a cap on the franchise. So what if the yearly show had ended not so much just at Mighty Morphin, but at the end of In Space, or Wild Force, or RPM? Would that have made a
I think
difference?
ending within space would have been a very strong choice. I think in that situation, it would have been more similar to the original Ninja Turtles cartoon, where it went on for, 10 years or so, whatever. And it became a very specific thing in people's childhoods, which then you could revisit in the
Oh,
future.
and the One Space finale, Countdown to Destruction, was touted as the series finale. I very distinctly remember those commercials.
But I thought by the time they actually started filming Countdown, they already knew they were approved for another season.
Fox Kids ran a few of the bumpers that did in fact say series finale, and then they changed it to season finale as it got closer towards the actual time. I remember those because I had recorded the show so many times that I clearly remember those bumpers. But anyway, I mean, I guess probably by then they would have known.
I mean, obviously the show wasn't. I mean, obviously the show wasn't as big in 1998 as it was in 93, but it was still a top brand, and I think there's a lot to be said
Yeah.
for going out on top.
Yeah, that makes I agree with that because I think from kind of like happenstance and what I've like learned since and read about and vague memories at the time, like Turbo really did kill it for a lot of people, and I hate to say that because it's not. I don't mean any disrespect to the Turbo cast or any of the people that worked on the show, but let's call a spade a spade. The second movie bombed.
Well,
The TV show had completely. Like, everybody I knew by that point, at the age of like I don't know 6 or 7, had completely grown out of a franchise, which kind of is the revolving door audience. It was basically dead in the water, and then from what I know, Space did a lot to kind of maybe not bring people back, but like really sell toys and bring it to a newer audience there. And I think that's why they decided to continue not only the franchise but also with the whole space aesthetic with Lost Galaxy, because In Space had been as popular as it was. And you can even look back now, we say that Mighty Morphin's the be all and end all, and it is, but In Space is one of the very few which has its very like sizable
Yeah.
like diehards within the fandom.
Yeah.
I think we can all agree on that.
The Countdown to Destruction ending, I think, is probably the best of the finite endings for the show if it was going to do that. It kind of reminds me a little bit, and probably Bryce and Seth and Jay will probably get this a little bit more, but I kind of put it towards like if Dragon Ball Z was going to end, the Cell Saga would have been a good spot to just stop it, because it kind of built up, and Gohan won, and Gohan, is now the savior and everything like that. It works the same way for Countdown to Destruction. It is a very good, perfect ending.
Actually,
all
is a
those
really good
seasons.
comparison because, like, as much as I am one of the biggest apologists for the Boo Saga, Cell would
He apologizes so much, everyone. He apologizes for it so much, and I do not accept his apology. I will never accept his apology.
You know who also gets that comparison? One of our famed listeners, Xeno Cyajin.
Yes.
Winner of our giveaway.
Oh,
Shout out to you, buddy.
excellent shout out, Seth. Excellent shout out.
If you want a quality shout out like that, tweet us at Ranger Nation Pod.
I'm gonna rustle some jimmies right now. Are you ready? I think another good comparison is the Countdown to Destruction as the ending of Power Rangers, the franchise as it was at the time, would have been just as good as Endgame being the de facto ending for the MCU.
actually no.
No, he
I
didn't.
could see that.
Oh no.
No, he obviously wouldn't have just stopped making the shared universe at that point, but I could see Endgame kind of being like the stopping point before they just like reboot stuff. And part
I
of me
think Countdown to. I
almost
think that's Well, I mean, we're not going into it. We don't need to go into a complete segue into the MCU. That's
a different podcast.
We're not MCU nation, but
could be.
but we're not going to be. I think yeah, Jason's right. I think of all of the potential endings, and we'll get onto the other ones next, I think Countdown to Destruction, especially if it had cameos or appearances from the likes of Jason and Tommy and so on, I think it really would have been a strong, let's put a cap on it for now, let's leave it for a few years, how can I miss you if you won't go away, and then maybe in 5 or 6 years later completely bring it back with something, bring it back with, had they ended it at In Space and then completely brought it back for Ninja Storm, where they had very cool looking suits that were kind of different from a norm and a different setup of it's 3 people on the team and then you get another 2 and you get another 1 kind of thing. I think that could have been a really good way of bringing that nostalgia and really hammering it back rather than just dragging it on and dragging it on and dragging it on, and that's kind of unfortunately where we've got to
Right.
now.
Like I
It's
said,
actually funny that you mentioned the cameos and stuff in Countdown, because I'm still genuinely surprised they didn't do that. It kind of makes me wonder whether or not they tried. That just felt like the perfect place to bring back even like the two like past Ranger actors that you already got to come back for in space. They could have Adam and
Mhm.
Justin at least could have come back in that regard. Instead, all we get is Trey, Phantom Ranger, and Blue Centurion.
but there's only one
Who
Gold
the hell's
Ranger.
Trey?
Jason is the one and only Gold
I
Ranger.
mean, he is.
Golden.
The weird thing is, though, the show, had it have ended there, the show then could have branched out a little bit more. It could have gone into animation. It could have gone into something else. And I always think that that's always been an extreme holdback
Exactly.
is they're saying, nope, we're just going to do the live action show and we're going to do the live action show only. And, not allowing it to, so what? Go back and do a Mighty Morphin animated series while the regular live action show is going on. Do something a little bit different, something to kind of bring in everybody once again, and it could have led into some other things.
We actually did get animated Power Rangers, the Netflix Voltron series.
Yes.
Don't people hate how that ended?
Yeah, I haven't finished it yet, but it's really good so far from where I'm at. Like this, it literally is everything I would have wanted out of an actual like animated Power Ranger show.
Well, maybe that's why they decided not to do it. Was you get too much of the Voltron comparisons there and similarities. Maybe they wanted Power Rangers to stay its own type of unique filming aspect.
I think that's to its detriment, though.
No, it is. It really is. But
It is. That's what I was saying. The way it's just trudged along, churning out Sentai after Sentai, it's kind of locked everybody into this very narrow-minded idea of what the brand could be. Or even now, we have fans who don't believe the brand should ever be anything more
they're
than
wrong.
just
They're
Yeah.
churning out
Can be
Sentai.
more than that. I
Year
don't
after year
mind
after
it
year.
just being that. But yes, it can be more.
I agree with John there wholeheartedly. I think that again, because it's funny because that goes back all the way back to one of the first things we were talking about, which was Mighty Morphin carrying on for 3 years, kind of cemented that as the be all end all of the show by then continuing Sentai adaptations for 30 years. Like, of course, you're going to get people who have been following the franchise for that long, the filthy man children that they will be, that can only think inside that very, very small confined box of this is what Power Rangers is, and it can't be anything else. And I've seen that online in a few different places, and it's a really bizarre thing to me because again, you look at Ninja Turtles, it's always to me the really good example to compare it to, which has been an animated show multiple times, a live action movie several times, a live action show once. Don't talk about that one. Now it's gonna be another animated movie, and it's every single time it tries something different, like the art style's different, or the tone is slightly different. Michael Bay is slightly different. It's it
Or even something that's like Power Rangers, that's unlike Ninja Turtles, is a fellow like adaptation of Japanese material, Transformers. Look at all the different mediums that's gone into.
good point.
Yep.
Yeah. No, John, I think John's completely right. And again, just to kind of bring it back in, because I know we've kind of gone a bit wild of this one, but other endings of the show could have potentially been one of Bryce's personal favorites, the end of the Power Rangers in Wild Force.
I love what,
And then, of
I
course, the other
love
one.
Thank
Wild
God that
Force,
never
but,
happened.
Let me finish, Bryce.
you didn't let me finish. I started.
I started. So the other potential ending would have been RPM, which I think, in some ways, was the second best ending for the show. Potentially, it could have been.
It is. It's just unfortunate that so many people didn't even realize RPM was airing until it was already done.
Yeah, that's the sad part.
I think that as a story, RPM would have been a great place to end it, but we would have missed out on so many outside the show things, like comics, DVDs, the amount of merchandising that Saban put back into it.
I would have been fine with the show itself stopping at RPM, but because we just haven't gotten anywhere near as good as that since. But comics and stuff like Hyperforce, even the 2017 movie, that definitely would have been missed, and that kind of makes me say grudgingly that Neo Saban was worth it.
Oh no, I don't get me wrong. I'm not saying just again to clarify to people listening too. We're not saying that by ending the show at that time we mean completely kill the franchise dead, never see her again. We just mean basically give it a rest and then bring it back full force. I think the comics could have still existed and the games absolutely could have still existed.
If it had ended at RPM, let's be real, Disney would not have ever touched it again.
But they would have sold it, I feel like.
Oh
Just
yeah,
like they ended up
Disney was
doing
selling it
anyway.
anyway. Yeah, Disney was selling it before RPM
Mhm.
was even a thought in Eddie's twinkly mind. You know, it's kind of one of those things. They made that decision. I think did Disney already own Marvel, or were they in the process of buying Marvel at that point in time?
I think they would have
It
owned
was
it.
around the same time, yeah.
Yeah. So Disney had made their minds up on the franchise by then, regardless. So the show would have gone to someone else. Like someone else would have bought it, even if just to kind of have a rights to the franchise in perpetuity, which I kind of have a feeling that Hasbro is going to do that after this year anyway. I think that doesn't mean that stuff like the comics wouldn't have existed. And I think there still would have been a demand for that in time, because again, the more things go away, the more people think, I miss this. I want to bring back this kind of thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah,
I think
okay.
I think Hasbro is finally taking those chances. I just worry that it's too late, especially
Yeah.
now that everything seems to be up in the air. We don't know what Hasbro is actually doing anymore.
I don't think Hasbro knows what they're doing.
No,
Yeah, that's the problem.
I think I'm gonna say something that's quite controversial here, but I think on paper, like once I keep saying once a ranger, once and always, and that's I think it's not. I don't honestly. I'm gonna again. This is another controversial take. I don't think it's a very good title. I think if you're trying to cater towards Mighty Morphin fans, it once and always doesn't really mean a whole lot to them. That's kind of more for the long-time fans, and I think
It's too fan
Should have been
specific,
called
yeah.
like Power Rangers Back to Action or something.
yeah, 100%, 100%, because I think that would have meant so much more to that wider audience if they're trying to get. I think there's so much which I think again we can discuss the trailer slightly towards the end of the podcast, but I think that there's so much that's right with the trailer. Let's be realistic. There are things in the trailer which is worth commending, but there's so much that I see as a missed opportunity for what it could be, and so that's what I was going to say. On paper, Once and Always and Cosmic Fury are a step in the right direction. It's just that the stepping in the wrong shoes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the
I really did.
conversation
I
died.
was trying to think of what
Just
to
like
say
the brand.
next. Oh man, but no, you're absolutely right there, because yeah, that's not a good title. Could have been literally anything else that called back to Mighty Morphin anyway. I would have even accepted it's Morphin time.
Yeah, I think that or literally just call it more. Don't even have Power Rangers in the title. Call the whole thing Morphin Time or something like that.
Or
Would have
Mighty
been
Morphin.
just yeah, like the comics do a perfectly good job with that. Yeah.
Mighty Morphin Time.
Day of the Robo Dumpster.
Oh god. We were talking about things that the trailer did well. Let's not talk about things the trailer didn't do too well.
Can we though?
Go on. I think we've segued into the. Come on, but it's like kind of by the time you guys are listening to this podcast, I'm sure either the special is aired or is about to air. We're not exactly the most timely of folk, but we'll give our full thoughts on the special once it's aired, and we'll try and be a bit more quick with that. But for now, I guess we can kind of discuss thoughts and feelings on the trailer.
Seth seemed to be really eager to share his thoughts, and I know exactly why. So, so let's give that to Seth.
Because for once, I am the most negative. I don't like the
Today
trailer.
playing the role of Bryce, it's Seth.
I don't think it was a great trailer.
Every complaint you've had about the trailer, I do agree with. Then there is the part of me that's just like I grew up on these people, and it feels really good seeing them again. It's not like the Grid Connection, where clearly just seeing Jason again wasn't enough to save it from being a complete dumpster fire. But like,
Well, I mean,
maybe when we get
let
Go ahead.
Seth explain what his criticisms were. We're talking about them. People don't know what they are.
actually, yeah, my bad. Let's go for that.
well, first of all, I'll probably be in your shoes on the never that it happens. We get Jungle Fury once and always,
God.
but it's a lot of them are small things, I admit, but I think that they add up. Like the teleportation effect, and like I know the old teleportation effect is terrible. It's not good, but from the point of view of it being for casual nostalgia, they should have recreated the original effect.
Yeah.
I mean, they could have created it and jazzed it up a little bit. I think we're all kind of hoping that's what they're going to do with a morph, and they're not going to go too far crazy with that one. But like, I feel like the original movie, did a slightly better looking version of a teleportation. Turbo really kind of. I think Turbo's one looked pretty good.
Turbo in space looked really good. Here's my thing: is I like it when the teleportation has a kind of a heaviness to it, if that's the right word. I like it to feel like they're being zapped in somewhere, and too many that's what I like about space and Turbo is they kind of get that little halo ring above them, and then they teleport through it. You know, almost like a head in a trail kind of thing. But
yeah.
And meanwhile, Once and Always is just kind of recycling the Dino Fury teleportation effect.
It is, but
individual colors onto
there's kind of a little bit of a heaviness to it. You kind of get that sound whenever they teleport in. I like that. That's the kind of stuff that I really like.
I think it's a good teleportation effect for Dino Fury.
It is, yeah. It's not like Seth said. It's not Mighty Morphin. Like they have all the big things to kind of like get the fans feeling nostalgic, like the juice bar. We have a new command center and all that. But I'm really hoping they have like a whole lot of like little things too that like real diehard fans will pick up on and appreciate again. Like having
Seems like they will.
like having something like the old teleportation effect, like
yeah,
having something that's more like the actual morph sequence and not like we got in Once a Ranger. Even though I liked that one.
Yeah, I think they will, because I think we've discussed it before, but I think having Adams Once a Ranger morph worked really well because it was within the confines of like a Disney season and it fit as a Disney morph. I think this isn't that. This is purely going for 90s nostalgia, or at least it should be. I think for me, I enjoyed the trailer. I think I've made it clear, and I'll just explain for people that I kind of don't like a lot of modern trailers just in terms of the formula for them. I think they're good for what they do. It just doesn't really work on me because I can see kind of like the emotional manipulation. It's like, open with a wide spanning shot of a horizon. Play a slow version of the theme song which you remember from childhood days. End with a little shitty joke. There's so many things. I've just dropped something else in the room because I'm legitimately moving my arms around like a maniac, even though I'm not on camera. There's so many distinct things that it's doing that kind of appeals, and it works. That's what it's supposed to do. So in a lot of ways, I will say it's probably the best Power Rangers themed trailer maybe ever. Maybe even comparing it to like the 2017 movie trailer.
I mean, it is better than New Rangers. I guess this is
More
old
phenomenal
Rangers.
Megazord.
Old.
No, I just hope that the morph is not too reminiscent of the original. I'm one that really likes the season 3 morph. I don't want them just shouting out their names and then it goes to Rocky and the helmet comes on and then boom, that's it. I want to see a full-fledged morph sequence for each one of them. I think that they deserve that, and I think it's something that needs to be in there.
Oh, solid disagree. I actually disagree with that completely. I think it needs to be as reminiscent of the original one as possible. I think that's, if you're doing nostalgia, that's how you do it. You make it, again, one of the weird things going by comments I've seen on things, and it's so funny to me, is that I guess, because again, I think a lot of the comments that I've seen And there does seem to be quite a lot of positive comments, and I get why, because the trailer did a lot of really good things to stir up nostalgia in people. I think a lot of people are saying, "Oh, it looks like they've purposely filmed it to match how it looked in the '90s, and they've used these cheesy '90s camera angles on purpose." And it's like, I hate to break it to people, but no, they've not. That's just how they still film it now, anyway. It's because it looks so dated. It's not. It's kind of like a happy accident in a lot of ways. And if that works for people, then awesome. I'm not going to criticize it, but call a spade a spade. It's just I think I've said in like to you guys that I feel like it looks like every other recent New Zealand season of Power Rangers. It doesn't look like
It does.
anything
It does. Yeah.
special. Like I feel like it should. It's yeah. And again, we've had comments from the showrunner, Mr. Bennett, that it's aimed at adult fans of Mighty Morphin, and for me, that's a major red because it looks like it's aimed at the same audience that it's been going for in the past 10 years anyway.
But Jay, they said kill twice.
It they did, and then they also said destroy in the same breath, which is really strange. Yeah.
It's just the way it was worded just made the whole line just really awkward.
It was oddly clunky. Like it's good that they're doing those things. It sounds weird coming from like Barbara Goodson's like really overdramatic Rita voice, but it's it is like I felt like the what's the Trini's daughter character named?
Is her name Min?
Min.
And
Like her delivery of the she killed mom was like oh that feels less like typical cheesy Power Rangers and more like something, just a simple use of a word like that really works. And then to immediately follow up with we have to destroy her. It was like, oh no. Oh, that's kind of missing the point.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
completely out of character for me, because I think I kind of have a reputation as being negative, which I don't agree with, but whatever. I fell for it. It worked for me. All of the emotional nostalgia points hit with me. It was a good trailer. It was exactly what I wanted it to be.
Oh
I'm
yeah, no,
still
I'm
still highly, highly, highly skeptical of how it will actually turn out, given who it was written by and who produced it and their track record. But just going by the trailer, because in fairness, that's all we can judge it by.
very true.
The trailer worked. I will say it's the most excited I've been for anything called Power Rangers since
Well, and
the
here's the
last
thing,
movie.
I'm super excited for it because I am, out of all of us here, I am one, maybe besides Seth, I can't remember off the top of my head, but never watched Mighty Morphin when it aired. I only caught Mighty Morphin back whenever Fox Kids was doing their one-time only thing, whenever they were rerunning all the episodes from Mighty Morphin up to wherever it was then at that point. That was my first forte into Mighty Morphin series. So for me, the nostalgia stuff doesn't hit as hard, and why I may not be as clingy to some of the old effects or some of the older ideas of that is because Mighty Morphin doesn't hold anything special for me.
I'm kind of caught in the middle here, because yeah, I didn't hate the trailer. There were things about it that I liked, but I didn't fall in love with it the same way I like instantly fell for that kind of behind the scenes look that we got a while back.
Yes,
It
that was also done really well. I'll give the props there where the props are due, and I think that is really with like this is the first time we're seeing the advantages of Netflix, because this feels like one of those shiny, clean Netflix productions, like the not so much the production. That's where I think it's gonna maybe not fail, but stumble a little bit, is when people are gonna get hyped for a Netflix quality trailer and a Netflix quality behind the scenes look. It's gonna be slightly different when you get a New Zealand Nickelodeon quality Rangers episode.
yeah.
Well, again, because I'm not the asshole people think I am, I'm going to give them credit and say that the things we saw in that trailer did appear to be of higher quality than what we get on the show currently. The CGI was a lot better. Even though the teleporting special effects weren't the original, I think they look really good. They don't look like what we usually see on on the show. It's very clean. It's very modern. It looks high
It
budget.
looked just like Dino Furies.
That's what I was going to say. Like, I don't know. I didn't watch a whole lot of Dino Fury, but I've heard you guys mention that the teleportation effect used in the trailer was the same one as from Dino Fury. Is that right? Or
It's not
very
exactly
similar?
the same.
Only difference
It's
is
similar,
that
but
they gave the Rangers their colors, so they actually did kind of fix one of my criticisms about that effect back during Dino Fury. If that had been for Dino Fury, I would have commended them for it, but instead they're recycling it for a Mighty Morphin teleportation.
Right, and that's where I think that for me is one of like I agree with John. I think the trailer itself, as a trailer, did its job. Considering all the shortcomings that I feel like the entire production has, I think I don't know how to describe it without sounding like I'm negative because I'm genuinely not towards it. I feel like there's a lot of shortcomings going into it just by proxy. You know, there's no, for better or worse, there's no Tommy, there's no Jason, there's no Kimberly. They're the three most popular characters from the show. Like,
I think, yeah,
I
that
think
sucks. And
on top of that, there's other issues too. Like, I don't know. I just feel like there's things which don't quite feel right about it. And again, the red flag for me is just using the same teleportation as a previous show. It's just like it's like a canned. It's all. I don't want to say lazy, but it's kind of lazy just to recycle the stuff that we've already got from a different show and not tailor it completely to Mighty Morphin. If that makes sense.
Yeah, here was something that I thought though too was, and maybe you guys feel the same way because we did kind of touch on this, just in our normal conversations, but I was more excited about Billy coming back and thought, oh yeah, David being back in it, blah 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 blah. But seeing Walter in this, I mean, he's like taking the prize for me on that. Just seeing him back and him leading that first charge of its morphin time and stuff. I don't know. I'm super thrilled for that, and that's actually probably hyping me up the most right at the moment.
Oh, I agree. I think the returning cast that are there. Well, I think two of the returning cast that are there are a big deal. I think. I'll in fact scratch that. I will add Barbara Goodson's voice to that because it's how often do they go to the extra mile of actually getting a voice back to do a voice in these kind of things. It's just that this is going to sound a bit odd, but it feels like it's a special episode of Power Rangers. It doesn't feel like it's a Mighty Morphin Power Rangers special. And like for me, I feel like that's the big missed opportunity. I mean, if you disagree, feel free to disagree. Go.
I'm not going to disagree, but again, because I'm not the negative asshole I'm made out to be, I'm not going to judge any of that until I actually see it.
I think
that's fair.
In terms of who came back and all that, that was largely out of their hands. So I'm not going to hold that against them until I see how they handle it.
Maybe another thing that I saw before it might have been because I think just in preparation for the podcast, I thought I'd do a little bit of reading up on like people's reactions to the trailer because I figured we might be talking about it, and it might have been on like a Facebook post or something somewhere. I'm not too sure, but I saw quite a lot of people that were like, because I think the post must have mentioned like tune in on April 19th for the like 50-minute special episode. A lot of people who've seen the trailer seem surprised that it's a 50-minute episode. I think people were expecting it to be like a full season.
Oh.
Or at least a movie. I think a lot of people aren't because again, you kind of look at it from the bubble of a fandom, like when, I've seen it since the announcement on Twitter, for example, that we've all known it's 50 minutes in length. But I think a lot of people that are just seeing it through this advertisement, there's nothing about that trailer that suggests that it's just a 50-minute episode. I think people are going to go in with the expectation that this is going to be a season or this is going to be a movie.
I would say less season and more people are going to expect a movie, and then we're just going to end up with it. They say 40 minutes?
It's 50.
Okay.
Or 55.
Something along those lines. I think
it's just under an hour.
The general audience, which really, really is supposed to be the target for this, and I don't feel like I think the trailer hit that audience pretty well. I think the overall thing might not do so much. I think they're going to expect longer than just a 50-minute special.
Yeah, and honestly, it should have been. It's
And
probably
again, you kind of juggle that, like I said before. You've got a 50-minute special of the thing that more people want to see, and then later in the year, you've got 10 episodes of the thing that not a whole lot of people realistically want to see. Again, that's in no way, shape, or form like a diss towards, Cosmic Fury. That's not shade to any of them. It's
No, it's just
I'm the one who
realistic.
disses Cosmic Fury.
well, that's another episode entirely. But yeah, I think it's, to me, it's backwards. I feel like if anything, Cosmic Fury could have been, the big. If you want to do a nice send off to the cast, because we've manufactured the idea of it for a popular cast, then great. Well, let's call a spade a spade. Like again, it's not. That's not to say that they're not good people, because that's never any criticism of something like that. It's never a criticism of the people involved itself. It's what it is. You know what I mean? It's not
Reality.
they're getting a season 3 of a show, not because it's the most popular one since Mighty Morphin. It's just because they're the most recent one, and they kind of scrambled to have content for this year coming. That's what it is. Like, again, we've seen the numbers. We know that the Dino Fury toys don't sell as well as other things. Like, that's not opinion. That's not conjecture. That's tangible data that we've seen. It's to have this 50-minute special first, and then when you could hook people, because if it does well, and it could do well, I don't want to say that it's not going to do well. It could really like appeal to people more than I'm expecting it to. What then? Are they going to tune into Cosmic Fury and be disappointed by what's going to be a kid show with characters they don't know or care about, like, and with a really short Lord Zed? Like, what's it going to do? It doesn't, to me. This has always been, for me, the idea. This is how you draw people back in. You're going to reboot the show. You're going to bring in you're going to bring in this nostalgia audience and maybe set it up for a new audience. Mighty Morphin Reunion's the way to do that. I think that's a really good point. I think doing that and then following it up with Cosmic Fury is a mistake.
Yeah, I could see that.
Well, that's a what if for another episode.
Yep.
Well, I think that wraps us up nicely there with the conversation. So, yeah. I hope you guys listening were entertained by this. Maybe you agree, maybe you don't. If you do, let us know in the comments. We really want to hear from you. Like I said, this episode was inspired by the comments of one of our listeners, and we really want to include you guys in the conversation. It's the whole reason for the name of a podcast. It's why we're doing this. We're really interested in being a wider voice for the franchise and for the fandom itself. We're not just going to parrot the same things that everyone else is going to tell you. We're not just going to feed you the standard lines that are coming down from people involved in the show that are just trying to promote the show or themselves. We're just a bunch of people that have opinions, and we want to share them, and we want to hear yours too. So again, any more things you guys have to share, anything you want to say, let us know in the comments. Anyone else have anything to share?
Nope, I think we're good.
No, I think we're good. Follow us at Ranger Nation Pod.
And in the immortal words of Hasbro Power Rangers, stay tuned.
Bye.